Hello and welcome to Inside Sources. I'm Greg Skordas alongside Holly Richardson. Today we are going to discuss a little bit the big, beautiful bill. And Holly, it gets through the House sort of barely. It's now at the
Barely.
Senate. Yeah, it's now at the Senate, and there's a lot of discussion from uh, Senate Republicans about some problems with the bill, things that they're concerned about, not the least of which are cuts to Medicaid, expanding the national debt by something like $3.7 trillion and just spending cuts in general. Do you think it's in trouble at the Senate, or do you think that ultimately this is going to go through?
I don't think it's going to go through the way it's currently written. I think you are right. There are a lot of Senate Republicans, at least enough to tank the bill, who say there's some big problems with the bill right now. And certainly we have Rand Paul, who has been leading out saying there's no way I'm voting for this the way it is. Right? We're supposed to be fiscally conservative. This doesn't cut anything. So I think it's in real trouble in the Senate. I know President Trump has been going over to talk to Senate Republicans and basically try to convince them to pass this bill. But one of the other things you have to know is that Elon Musk hates the bill. And in fact, he's gone on a campaign to say, kill the bill. So now you have these two forces that were working together now opposed to each other, President Trump and Elon Musk.
No, Musk has been very critical of the bill, and I also noticed that several uh, House Republicans have said it was sort of thrown on us. It's 1,038 pages.
Yep.
We were sort of put to the vote. Had I read page XXY, I would have never
Right.
voted for this. And their constituents are upset. So I mean, I think some House members would like to have a do-over. They may get that chance, like you say, if the Senate makes some tweaks and changes and it goes back to the House.
Yeah.
But there's probably nothing they can do now. They voted for it, but I assume that there are at least several House members who are thinking, kind of hope this does come back to us and we can make some changes. But that was shocking to me. And I know that it's. I mean, you've been in the legislature before. You know how bills are. Sometimes they're thrown at you a little bit, and you don't have a lot of time to read them. This is one that I think you and I were talking to. Was it Evenson from the Deseret News the other day, who said this was the kind of bill that probably should have been divided into something like 13 sections,
Right.
and, and maybe having this big lump sum bill
Right.
caused problems.
Right. And I think that is the case. And that's one of the things that's different on the federal level than on the state level. On the state level, really bills stay to one topic. But I think even by the name that it has garnered, right? The one big beautiful bill, they're trying to lump everything in there, the border and AI regulation and budget and it's really a lot of different things. And one of the components of that bill is this AI regulation that basically says the federal government is going to be in charge of all AI, and states can't make any individual regulation for artificial intelligence in their state for a decade. Um, Even Marjorie Taylor Greene is like, that's bad. I should have read the bill. I didn't read that part, and I'm opposed to that part, right? So to your earlier point, it's one of the things, right, where it's so complex that it's impossible. It's physically impossible to read 1,000-page bill in 24 hours or less than 24 hours, whatever it is that they had. And so you pass it, and what was that saying? You got to pass the bill to find out what's in the bill.
Right. So I do want to ask you a question about the AI thing. In a day when we seem to be giving more and more, and the administration seemingly giving more and more power back to the states, it's
Right.
odd that there would be provision as it relates to AI. And I don't know if we even know the answer to this, but I'm wondering why that was even put in the bill, what the intent is. And maybe we're just trying to get a handle on AI, and the feds can at least get the first shot at it. But 10 years seems like a long time, and there's got to be people in the states
Yeah.
who are going, wait a minute, that's can't don't we have more say in this?
Yeah, and I don't know the reason why they put that in there, to be honest, but I do know AI is expanding exponentially right now, so its capabilities are increasing dramatically, really all the time, and what we're seeing is a moratorium on a decade. I mean, a decade-long moratorium is going to be really difficult to really capture. I think what states need to do, or what states feel like they need to do. So Utah has already gotten some things, and we've talked about at the Utah State Legislature, they talked about this last legislative session, AI generated pornographic images, right? Explicit images. And whether that is adult women or it's children, right? Those are deeply disturbing. But what if the federal government, 8 years from now says, well, those are fine. You don't need to regulate those. But who knows, what it's going to look like 10 years from now. So that's one of the issues too.
Yeah, another issue that I'd like to talk about briefly is what's happening to Medicaid, and I can't imagine what it would be like to be a Republican legislator or senator thinking about reelection in 2026 in a district where a lot of your constituents rely on Medicaid, because from what we're hearing, something like 10 million current recipients of Medicaid will have that at risk. And there's a provision, I think, that requires them to engage in employment or have worked in employment recently. That some of these people are like, wait a minute, that's a little bit of water under the bridge. Don't you suppose that's something that's got to be revisited by the Senate before it gets back to the House?
I think that's likely. And, we've talked about this before, you and I, Senator Joni Ernst, who said, well, we're all going to die at a recent town hall. And then she doubled down the next day by going to a cemetery. And she was pretty snarky in her response and saying, I thought everybody knew that actually we're all going to die. Right. So Chuck Schumer, who's a Democrat, he's the minority leader in the Senate right now. He said he's calling it the We're All Gonna Die Act. So she has handed him, a campaign platform. So that definitely is an issue. And I think one of the discussions, and we've maybe talked about this before another time, but you can have a conversation about how we need to address Medicaid spending. And I feel like sometimes Republicans think they're trying to do this, but you can also be kind, right? You can be compassionate. And to her credit, Senator Ernst, right after she said we're all going to die, she said, look, we're trying to make sure that Medicaid still covers the people who really need it, the people who are the most vulnerable, right? I think that's the correct response, as you're starting to look at those types of cuts. But when you just say things like we're all going to die, and it's this blanket, we're hatcheting all of these people off of Medicaid, that comes across as uncaring, and it really impacts people in all of these districts across the United States.
And it's pretty clear, and I know we need to wrap up pretty soon here, Holly, that Democrats are universally, both in the House and the Senate, opposed to this. I mean, the administration's not going to get any support from the Democrats, are they?
No support from the Democrats. It's going to be unanimous, a unanimous no from the Democrats. But in the Senate, you have enough Republicans now that the bill cannot pass unless it's changed. You just don't have enough Republican votes in the Senate to do it.
Yeah, it seems like at least one of our senators, talking about John Curtis, has some concerns about it. Mike Lee's concerned about the debt problem, and Curtis is concerned about some of the cuts that we're doing to green energy and things like that. So even our own senators here are taking some hard looks at it.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, last question. It's going to pass in some capacity, isn't it? Or do we know? Or do you know?
We actually don't know. We don't know for sure. They will pass some form of something to fund the government, but for years it's been a continuing resolution saying we're going to fund it this way. One of the other interesting pieces of this is the debt ceiling conversation, right? So it's basically your credit limit. And for a long, long time, Republicans are like, we've got to stop increasing the debt ceiling. Well, just this week, President Trump has come out and said, let's just eliminate it altogether, right? Let's just stop having the conversation about a debt ceiling. And I think some people's heads are probably exploding at this point, because that's totally against what Republican talking points have been for a really long time. But he's just like, look, it hampers our conversation. Let's just get rid of it. So that's one additional thing that's going on in DC this week.
I've heard that before, and actually there is some sense to that. Why argue about something? We're going to increase it anyway.
That's right. We're going to blow past it anyway.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Holly. We'll stay tuned to that one and see what happens, and watch what happens in the Senate. And then when it gets back to the House, maybe we'll have a big, beautiful bill here in June. Maybe we won't.
Maybe we won't. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, again. So it's been great to be here with you.
Thanks.